The time has finally come for me to make a video about the most requested topic I think on this channel ever. I'm finally going to talk about how I learned drawing from imagination. I took a lot of notes, so if I look down at the screen, you know I'm reading my notes because I think this is such a huge topic. So before starting with this video, I want to ask a question. Why do you want to draw from imagination in the first place? Is it because you want to learn as much as possible and check on your real knowledge by drawing from imagination? Or is it because you don't want to rely on references and maybe you are a little bit too lazy to look up references all the time? Or, and that is also a very valid human feeling, is it because you want to impress other people and maybe this is your idea of an amazing artist? For me, I can envision myself in a cafe sketching in my sketchbook, just me, a pen and my paper and my ideas without references. Because in public, for me, I am way too lazy to pull out my phone or my computer to look up references. This is my dream that I have. And if you're new to my channel, hello, I am a self-taught artist and I've been practicing drawing from imagination for quite some time now, and I've learned a lot of things throughout the years, and I think I also wasted a couple of years improving less than I could have done if I would have studied it the right way. I also asked you for questions on YouTube or Instagram, and I tried to implement the answers into this whole video, but there are some questions that I just couldn't fit into the single topics, so I'm going to do a little Q&A at the end of the video. The best way to start this video is by showing you my personal process and how I develop my art. So enjoy this part. If you want to see my very early ugly drawings, then I would recommend you to go check out a very old video of mine where I showed you my first couple of sketchbooks, which is very embarrassing. Yeah, you can see anatomy, then a scene that I was thinking about drawing for my mom. One sketchbook that was very important was the very big sketchbook. I don't like to look at this because I think the drawings in this are so ugly, but studies from different artists that I wrote down here and then tried to replicate this. You can see everybody starts somewhere and yeah. I'm rushing this because I have a lot to show and I don't have that much time. But if you're interested, I want to continue my old sketchbook series. Here I actually drew from imagination. I was very into adding a lot of contrast. I overdid it so much, I had contrast blindness. And then this page, this is an Ahmed Al-Duri study, and then this is I can't read it, this is a Karl Kopinski study, and then this is something from imagination. This is also something that I used to do quite a lot. This is the sketchbook where I learned so much. This is the sketchbook from 2 to 3 years later, 2020 and 2021. And this is from imagination. And this is where, oh my God, I want to get back to drawing now. These are also from imagination. This is from reference again. And I really try to play around with that. This is from imagination. This is also from imagination. And this is something that I was and still am very proud of. And this was like so important for how my style developed from here on. This is a sketch from 2022. One of my favorite sketches ever with pencil. This was such a breakthrough, again from imagination. I really took my time, learned how to slow down a little bit. Here I was actually in a coffee store and I was drawing from imagination. This is the first drawing where I was very intimidated and I don't like this drawing at all. Ignore this. Actually, don't ignore it. It's important. And then I really love this, and this is like my favorite. Oh my God, I love these two drawings so much. And they are all from imagination in a coffee store. Let's jump into my sketchbook that I filled most recently. Here, for example, I took a photo of myself and I drew this. And then this whole spread is from imagination, except for the hands, I think. This is, for example, from photo. And then these are all from imagination. Oh my God, I love this face so much. This whole spread is from imagination again, as you can tell with the face. But that happens, you know. That's basically my journey summed up very quickly. Quick interruption because I forgot to mention that. But I also recorded while I was drawing a whole spread completely from imagination in my sketchbook. So I will also show you the footage of that while talking. And I hope you will enjoy the rest of the video. In order to draw from imagination, and I know that a lot of people are trying to look for a cheat code, I did so as well. And then I had to learn the hard way after wasting a couple of years, sadly. But you need to have a good understanding of form, because form is the foundation to everything you're drawing. Everything. There is no cheat code. You have to learn how to draw form. Here is what I did wrong in the past. I copied photos and I thought that that would be enough. Yes, I tried to learn anatomy, and copying anatomy kind of helped me a little bit to get a basic understanding for anatomy. But in the long run, my knowledge then was not a good foundation for me to draw anatomy from imagination. I ended up not improving as much as I could have improved if I would have just started learning the form first. Because I practiced not drawing from imagination, but I practiced how to be a good printer. And that is a completely different thing than the goal you're trying to tackle here. Did I improve? Yeah. Did I improve as much as I could have improved in that time? Definitely no. One video, and I will leave you all the sources that I use and talk about in the description down below, so please check this out after the video. One video that really opened my eyes was a video where someone explained the difference between being a Bob and being a good artist. I don't know how he got the good artist, but I just remember the Bob thing because I wrote it down in my sketchbook everywhere ever since I saw that video, and I wrote down, don't be a Bob. And the artist in the video explained how much of a difference it actually makes if you understand the form that you're drawing. And there are quick little things that I like to do every now and then. For example, you can practice perspective with simple cubes and shapes and cylinders and whatnot. What also really helped me is I like to draw, sometimes as a warm-up, different shapes or forms and then turn them around on the paper. Another very cool thing that I came up with, I don't know, it's probably a practice that a lot of people do, was that I looked at an item on my desk. Maybe this hand cream. I'm covering the brand because this is not an ad. And then I looked at this hand cream and I was thinking, okay, I will look at it from this view, but I will try to draw it from a different angle, and then I can check up on it and see how I, did and if I made something wrong or right. And then I could do it again and again and with different objects. And once you are comfortable with that, you can apply that to anatomy. Something that you can also do, depending on where you want to go with your style, is you can exaggerate form and then see how that will look in different perspectives and practice exaggerating anatomy in that kind of way. But then again, it depends on where you want to go with your art. If you want to do like very realistic stuff, then you don't necessarily have to do that, but it's always helpful, I think. Another huge topic after understanding form is understanding anatomy. I actually, to be honest, think that learning anatomy and understanding form actually go hand in hand, because once you learn form, it's so easy to draw the human body. The only thing that comes on top of that is the knowledge where the muscles are and what looks a certain way in the body in a specific pose or something like that. If you want to draw living objects, you need a certain level of anatomy. And no, I don't think that you have to remember every single name of every single muscle. But I think it's helpful to know the biggest muscles that are visible most of the time in movements in order to not forget them. But for me, for example, I am very good at remembering the muscles in the torso and the arms. But when it comes to the legs, I am going to practice that again soon, because sometimes I forget it and I always come back to anatomy and I always learn something new that I didn't remember before that. I think you will never stop learning anatomy. I remember so many huge aha moments from that time when I was really studying anatomy. For example, there is this thing that I learned from George Bridgman. I can recommend you the book very, very, very much. There was this one topic where he described the arm like a chain. Those of you who already learned that probably felt the same way in that exact moment. I personally start with George Bridgman because I heard that name everywhere. Would I recommend to do that? Definitely not, because I think George Bridgman is very good if you have a little bit of basic knowledge about anatomy. So I would recommend you to start with Michael Hampton instead. I will leave you the name in the description. Another good source for that is also Proco. I think Proco has the best anatomy videos. Like, Proco explains everything so amazingly. As I mentioned, I still revisit anatomy every now and then because I just think that you will learn something new with every single revision. Do you say it like that? Revision? I think so. I don't know. How do I practice anatomy? I used to warm up every single day with a 30. Oh my god, that's the German in me. I used to warm up every day with a 30-second to 2-minute pose by using line of action. Again, link in the description. It is really helpful to learn the gesture as well as the anatomy, because when you draw the gesture, you can just build up the anatomy on top of it. But also what I like to do is if I, for example, practice hands. So I started drawing them from reference, and then I decided to go into George Bridgman studies. All of those you can see with green pencil, color pencil, and normal pencil are from George Bridgman. And then I think these are, the blue ones are based on photo, considering what I learned. And then the brown hands are completely from imagination. Yeah, that is a lot of work, but it's very, very helpful for really understanding anatomy. And now that I'm talking about it, I actually really want to do that again. And you can also apply this to every other thing you want to practice. For example, if you want to practice pants or belts, you can just draw them from imagination and then draw your own version. And if you notice something you are kind of missing, knowledge you're not having yet, then you can revisit the drawing from reference part, which is like such a game changer. I think this chapter is probably the one with the biggest misconception ever, the usage of references. Let's talk about the questions that I asked in the beginning of this video. Why do you want to draw from imagination? Is it because you want to learn something and check on your knowledge? Is it because you don't want to rely on using references because you are maybe lazy or for any other reason? Or is it because you want to impress other people? All of these reasons are human and valid, but I think, and this is very important, if you are drawing for other people, then you will end up in a spot where you don't feel as free anymore, because all you do is drawing with the reaction of other people in your head. And I think every artist has been in that spot once or twice in their life. If you are limiting yourself to only draw from imagination because you want to impress other people, you are limiting yourself from producing very good art, and also you're limiting yourself from improving a lot. As I mentioned, I have this vision in my head where I draw in a cafe without using references, but also, sadly, I am sometimes a little bit too lazy to take reference photos or look up reference photos because it's extra work, and sometimes I would rather just sit down and draw and get my idea down, and also build up my own characters, make up my own words and everything. But that answer shows you that I don't have to limit myself. I don't have to deny myself the usage of references in order to someday achieve the goal of me drawing from imagination. I personally think that using references is so important in the whole process of being capable of drawing well from imagination someday. So, do I use references? Yes, definitely yes. Also, sometimes I draw from imagination, but I still have Pinterest open because I want to get inspired. Does that count as using references? I'd say yeah, and I also would say no, because I'm still trying to draw the pose and character from imagination, but I still want to get inspired by something because it's just a casual drawing session for me. I personally think that it's a common misconception that using references is cheating. I thought so myself for a very long time, and I can remember when I met Ahmed Al-Juri for the first time in my life, I talked to him about that, and he was like, oh no, references are not cheating. And then he explained to me why that's the case. And I still had this belief in me that using references is cheating. You have to be an amazing artist, and in order to be an amazing artist, you wouldn't need references at all. That's just not true. It's not true at all. Every time I think about me being so focused on that whole drawing from reference is cheating thing, I can only shake my head, because that was so wrong. It's just so wrong. Yes, drawing from imagination is a sign of you having a lot of knowledge about things, and it's very comfortable because you don't have to look up references or take photos or anything. But it's just one of many skills you can practice when it comes to art. What is amazing to me is that ever since I stopped being so focused on not being allowed to use references, I all of a sudden felt so free and creative, because where there are no boundaries, creativity is like free. I use references for studying things and to get an understanding of things, because if you understand something very well, you can draw it from imagination. For inspiration, as I mentioned in my warm-ups, I rarely copy images. anymore. I use them to get inspired for characters. Oh my God, it's getting so hot. I had to open the door a little bit to maybe get some air circulation. It's so hot in here. Like, oh my God, the heat wave in Europe is terrible right now. I'm sorry. But yeah, sometimes when I draw from imaginations, I feel stuck. And this is the most important part. When you feel stuck, you have to listen. This is the point where you know, oh, I'm lacking a skill. I'm lacking knowledge here. And then you can learn. And this is also the part where I take reference photos. For example, if I struggle with my hand in a certain position, or I just can't come up with how someone would naturally hold, for example, a cup of tea or something, then I can take a reference photo and just get a better understanding of that. And for example, if I want to draw a bag, I can just look up multiple bags, and in that way you will enlarge in your visual library, which is also very important. When I was younger and I was struggling a lot with wanting to improve anatomy, wanting to improve drawing from imagination, but at the same time you have to come up with something to draw from imagination first, it's a lot to swallow and it's a lot to think about. What I used to do was I had this Marvel Heroes book where every single Marvel character was in there, and then I sometimes flipped through it and stopped at a random page, and then I picked one character that I drew from different angles and perspectives. It sounds more epic than the drawings actually turned out, but it helped me. It helped me quite a lot, actually. How I come up with something to draw. One thing that I struggled with for so long was that I always put so much pressure on my shoulders, and that was like crazy. I made a video more in detail about me overcoming that, and that is Conquer the Fear of Drawing. I will put it here or here, I don't know, and also in the description down below. If you're struggling with that, I would really recommend you to check that out because it helped me so much. I am so happy that I did that. One of the effects this pressure had on me was that I was just so anxious to just sit down and come up with something to draw. I remember the anxiety when I sat in front of my paper and I was like, you need to come up with something on the spot. If not, you're a bad artist. And then I couldn't come up with something because there was so much pressure. And if you're so anxious and your thoughts are revolving around that pressure you put on yourself, there is no way you can come up with ideas. You have to learn to let that go a little bit. Not only a little bit, a lot. So I had to tackle that first. And it is okay if you don't come up with a masterpiece every single time. I like to start with the same thing most of the times when I start a new spread, because that's something that I like to draw and it comes easy to me, and then you can build up from there. That's totally fine. You don't have to be creative every single day. You just want to draw. Someone also asked me whether I can envision something in my mind or how well I can imagine and see things with my inner eye. That is very difficult for me to describe because I can see with my inner eye and I can envision things. And if I envision something, for example, a character, I can also fully come up with a concept in my head, but I rarely do that. I also like to brainstorm on my paper. For example, when I draw in my sketchbook from imagination, I rarely have an idea of what I'm doing. I most of the time come up with something when I'm drawing, in the act of drawing. There are different techniques for that. I always just like to start drawing and then see what I will end up with. There's also this technique where you scribble random lines and then you look at it and you try to see what you can see in it. That also sometimes helps me to figure out what I want to draw. But I use that technique very rarely. Don't be afraid when it comes to drawing from imagination. If you don't see anything with your inner eye, that's fine. You can think out loud on your sketchbook, which is kind of a very valid usage of your sketchbook paper. That is something that I like to do, but sometimes, for example, I lay down on the couch and sometimes when I do nothing, my brain starts to be very creative and I start coming up with random characters. This is the time where I use my inner eye to be creative. So there are these two different ways that I like to be creative and that I like to come up with characters. Every time I stop forcing ideas out of myself and I start listening to the random thoughts in my head, then I come up with ideas rather than forcing them out, if that makes sense. And I want to emphasize on this again, keep in mind to leave the pressure out of this, because the goal is just to draw, to put the pen on paper, and not to come up with a masterpiece every single day. I want to talk a little bit about this because I think there are a lot of misconceptions on the internet about what materials to use as well. I know a lot of artists, especially because of how great Kim Jung-gi was, recommend to draw just with a fountain pen or with a brush pen or anything like that, straight with ink on paper. I don't know if that is really necessary. I think you can learn so much by doing that. You can learn how to draw more confidently. You can learn how to let go of perfectionism. You can learn and practice your line quality. But I think the last thing, for example, you can also practice in different ways. As much as I love how that challenges you in a certain way, I think you can practice drawing from imagination with a lot of different mediums as well. Let's say you're practicing drawing from imagination with pencil. You can erase pencil, which means if you're facing something that you're struggling with, you can actually try again if you're not drawing digitally, because then you can try again immediately without even, with the benefits of digital drawing. But you can erase and you can try again. And if you are someone who's like stuck because they are perfectionists, you can set a timer and say, okay, I give myself 30 minutes to figure this out. And if I don't figure it out, then I will move on to a different drawing. Totally fine. And you can practice. Also, if you're doing this with ink, you can correct it right next to the piece, because that's also something that I sometimes like to do. If I draw, for example, let's say a pose and I ended up messing up the hand, then I can just draw the hand right next to it in a better way. And that way you can also learn and improve. I'm just trying to tell you why I don't think that you have to necessarily only work with ink on paper, because that is something that you hear everywhere on the internet. And I just personally think that's not true. You can always switch up your technique. You can always try different things. Lately, I like to sketch with pencil and then go on top of it with either ballpoint pen or a fountain pen or anything like that. I personally like to work with a sketch structure because I can see what I'm doing. Sometimes I also like to sketch that with ballpoint pen and then just draw on top of it with that same ballpoint pen, but a little bit darker. That also works very well for me. Figure it out for yourself. What do you like? What is fun to you? And yeah, what do you feel like drawing with? All I want to say is don't limit yourself by choosing only one supply that you're allowed to use. Don't limit yourself by denying yourself the usage of references. Don't deny yourself anything. Allow yourself everything when it comes to drawing and practicing art. Another thing that I really want to emphasize on is mistakes will happen. You will draw the most horrendous looking faces many times. It's just how this goes. And those mistakes are very important in order to improve. They have to happen. I still mess up drawings sometimes so badly, it's crazy. And now it's just an ugly sketch. Sometimes it's an ugly painting. I don't know, but you improve. Yeah, of course, I also feel sometimes very shitty about myself. Depending on the mood, I can end up being sad or frustrated or whatever. Oh my God, I used to cry so much when I was putting so much pressure on myself every time I ended up drawing something bad. But then I learned to let go of the pressure, and now I am actually kind of okay with messing up a drawing every now and then. So that's just part of growing. And now let me go to the questions you had. Which methods do you prefer to make sure that the anatomy is correct? I learned anatomy and I'm still learning anatomy because, oh my God, I also mess up anatomy quite a lot of times. Whew. Something that I like to do if I'm unsure is check up the ratios with the head and the whole body. And sometimes when I draw in my sketchbook and I'm not sure if that's right, I take a photo and then I flip the photo, or you can just stand in front of a mirror. That's always helpful. I try not to use like this very structured building up technique because I think that actually limits myself. It takes away from drawing unique faces, if that makes sense. When did you start drawing from imagination? I didn't answer that. I think I started when I was 16, but I spent, 4 years not studying the form. I'm now 27 if you're curious. What is your inspiration? Okay, I think if you are looking for your inspiration, you have to look for who you are. And what helped me was that I started to notice what things I like. For example, I like masks. I like very specific colors. I like very specific clothes. And I think I know what my taste is. Based on that, I know what visually inspires me. But there are also many different things I really like. I love people. I think that's also why I lean towards drawing characters so much, because I just love people. I remember when I was younger, I was sitting on the bus and I always imagined how the life of the people around me were and what they were experiencing in that moment, which sounds weird, but I really love to do that. I love people. That inspires me quite a lot. I love different cultures. I love learning about different cultures because I think we are all human and they are so different and similar at the same time. So I think that's a huge topic as well for me. I like people. I love the world, and I know my taste, I think. Did I make a video on that a couple of years ago? I don't know, but I can do an update if you're interested. Again, if I don't answer your question here, I think I've answered them in the whole video before. I'm only going to answer the questions that I think I haven't talked about in the video. A lot of people also ask me about my process before illustrating and coming up with ideas. Maybe I will do another video on that actually. I see there are a lot of people who want to know something about that. My question would be about what exercises for your creative muscles do you find most effective? Also your journey towards finding a balance of what works for you in regard of studying versus drawing from imagination. Oh, thanks for sharing your lovely work. Thank you. Drawing from reference and then drawing from imagination. And if I notice me lacking knowledge, drawing from reference again and then drawing from imagination again. I like to draw from imagination so much. When I wanted to draw from reference again, I noticed that I haven't done that in a very long time and that I felt rusty with that. So I spent a whole day drawing 60 faces from reference. So I think every now and then trying to either draw from reference if you draw a lot from imagination or vice versa. Practice both of these things. So I don't know if that's helpful. Oh my God. I think I answered all of the other questions in the video. If I didn't, comment them if you want to. I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in my next one.